let's get to, the story that we've been talking about for months in our weekly conversations here on the program, almost every day, talking about the Jet blue line. We knew how stocked it was, how deep it was, and the fact that you can only have so many players on. What do you make of Johnny Kovacevic being put on waivers when he did and getting claimed by the Montreal Canadiens, and rumors that there were multiple teams that put a claim in on Kovacevic? And of course, Ville Heinola going to the Manitoba Moose. And the guy that we didn't talk about very much that's still with the club is Kyle Capobianco. And, it seemed at the end of the preseason, he wasn't even playing really in the games. They were going with Stanley. They were going with Schmidt. They were going with Heinola. Where is Capobianco left on all of this? So maybe step up to the buffet, as our Ken Weeb would say, and give us your thoughts on everything that's happened blue line wise to where we are today.
Well, I'll start on the hottest topic of all, and that's the Ville Heinola one. And it's the freshest because we just a few minutes ago, just spoke to Rick Bowness here in Banff at the rink about Ville. And it was interesting. I just tweeted out one of his comments a few moments ago that he said the conversation with Ville, I told him, you're an NHL player, to which Ville, I'm putting words in his mouth, but you wonder if he thought, well, then why aren't I in the NHL? But you wonder if that's what the young man's thinking. You're being told you're an NHL player, but you're being assigned to the AHL yet again. It was interesting to hear Rick Bowness's explanation. And, it didn't surprise me how he explained it. First and foremost, if Ville Heinola is going to play in the top six, Rick Bowness believes he should play on the power play, but that's where one of his real strengths is. And Rick Bowness says with Josh Morrissey, Neil Pionk, and Nate Schmidt, he has those veterans ahead of the young guy, the kid, on the power play. So he doesn't necessarily see a spot right now for him on the power play. So that takes away maybe an area where Ville would be a real weapon. And I think his best hockey in the preseason, we saw him do some really good things on the power play. I think Rick Bowness, though, wants to give Morrissey, Pionk, Schmidt a chance to be the anchors on the blue line on the power play. That could change, certainly. And of course, injuries can come up. But to start the year, he doesn't have Ville on the power play. We also know that, he wasn't using Ville Heinola on the penalty kill in preseason. Ville's done some in minor leagues with the Moose, yes. But I don't think they were ready to give him some PK minutes here. So that leaves a guy that Rick Bowness probably feels he's not going to play him nearly as much as he'd like. And the other big thing, Huss, just to be clear, a guy like Kyle Capobianco did not beat Ville Heinola out for a job. And I can't stress that enough. Kyle Capobianco is likely not playing over Ville Heinola. And if the Jets get an injury or two on the blue line, I fully expect Ville would come up and be in the lineup before a guy like Capobianco. But the fact is, Capobianco, they don't have an issue with sitting him in the press box as the seventh or more likely the eighth guy if they're going to keep 8D. They do not want to do that with Ville. They want him to go down and anchor the Moose power play, to play on the top unit, to play 24 minutes a night, and be ready if an injury or circumstance requires them to bring him up. So you can debate whether or not Ville should be in your starting six. The fact, though, that they don't view him today as being in that starting six and the power play usage is a big reason for it, there's no value in parking him in the box as 7 or 8 right now. He's a phone call away. He's playing in the same city as the NHL team. He doesn't need waivers. And that was, agree or disagree, that was what was behind the decision.
So where does that leave, Mike, Logan Stanley and Dylan Samberg? We've been talking about the triple threat match. Who's going to get to the top of the ladder and get that spot? Who's going to be in the lineup on Friday? Do we know why whoever it is that's won that job is that spot? And is that the way things will be going forward? Or do you expect to see both of those players get in games early in the season?
I do expect to see both players get in. And in fact, I specifically asked Rick Bowness a bit ago here, are we going to see like a rotation and an ongoing competition between Stanley and Samberg for that sixth spot? And he said yes. And then he threw Capobianco's name. To me, Capobianco's the wild card. And here's why. And it goes back to what you were asking about a few minutes ago where he factors in. The Jets are still going to need to make one more roster cut here by Friday. Mason Appleton, yes, he's still skating in a red non-contact, but the expectation is he's playing on Friday. So he won't be on IR come Friday night. And neither will Pierre-Luc Dubois. He was the full participant. So they can't bank a spot by putting a guy on the injured list. And Axel Jonsson Falaby, and it's going to take me a while to get used to saying, and I probably just butchered it.
Just go with Axel.
Let's just call him Axel. Rick Bowness confirmed the work visa situation will be rectified by Thursday. He will be at practice Thursday in Winnipeg. He will be added to the roster by the end of the week. So this isn't a situation where it's going to drag out a week or two, buying them some time. So they are going to have to make one more roster move. And I guess the question I have is Kyle Capobianco that roster move? Would they potentially go 14-7, especially when one of the 14 is a guy that will just get to town on Thursday and have one practice under his belt? I mean, I don't know how quickly you work Axel necessarily into the lineup. So maybe you want an extra forward here to start. But going back to your Kovacevic question, I must admit I was surprised. But in the eyes of the Jets, the only way I can really explain it is they saw Kyle Capobianco, who is the same age as Johnny Kovacevic, albeit not a drafted and developed guy, a guy they went out and signed last summer. They view him as basically he outplayed Johnny Kovacevic. And, he's a guy, and I don't know if there's the same concern about losing him on waivers if they were to put him on waivers in a day or two. But I am curious to see what the last kind of, shoe to fall here is. And what was telling as well, Huss, during practice today on that fourth line, the Jets were basically doing a 4-man rotation for who was playing on the fourth line. You had Gustafsson, and I don't think he's going anywhere. You had Gagne. I don't really think he's going anywhere. And then you had Toninato and Manalainen. And they were all kind of rotating. The fourth line, it was 3 of those 4 guys, like every line rush. And now you're going to add Axel to that mix. I don't know what the fourth line is come Friday because I don't know if a forward is getting cut. To me, Dominic Toninato would be the guy that probably goes if they're going to cut a forward. But I don't know that they're going to cut a forward. They may just decide that Capobianco goes and they basically have 7D and it's a Stanley and Schmidt rotation early in the year until one guy either puts his stamp on that job or both guys disappoint. And then that's where a guy like Ville comes into play. So there are still some questions about the lineup that I think we're still a few days away at the very least from having answered.
Do you think the Jets were surprised that Kovacevic had the interest that he had? I had speculated last week. I mean, we always sort of maybe overvalue the guys that we see all the time. And you don't have as much of an idea of what's happening in the other 31 teams. Everyone's making tough decisions right now, putting guys on waivers, getting them through. Right. Did it catch them by surprise that, apparently multiple teams put in claims on him?
Well, and not only that, Huss, but he didn't even get past number 1. I mean, Montreal had first dibs at him and they claimed him, which if I'm the Jets, that tells me, looks like a lot of teams maybe saw value in a guy that we didn't. And I'm not suggesting the Jets don't see value in Johnny Kovacevic. It's just, it feels like this was something that maybe there are other ways around this. And so I go back to Capobianco and I'll say this, Huss. If the Jets are going to keep Capobianco around essentially as the 8th defenseman, like if Stanley and Samberg are kind of rotating and you've got Capobianco here as number 8, if I'm the Jets, why wouldn't you have waived Capobianco and kept Kovacevic around as the 8th defenseman? All things being equal, one is a journeyman you went out and signed last summer for a league minimum, basically. The other is a guy you've spent years drafting and developing. I would rather, if you're going to lose a defenseman because you have to waive one of them, I would prefer it to be the guy that you just went out and signed last summer, not the guy that you've spent years investing in. So, I mean, if they end up waiving Capobianco this week, then I'd say it's kind of a moot point. Both guys were gone. But if they keep Capobianco just to kind of sit him as the number 8 guy, To me, I would have done the reverse. I would have waived Capobianco. I would have kept Kovacevic, and at least you hold on to your asset. Would the Montreal Canadiens have claimed Kyle Capobianco? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe. But it was some curious asset management for sure. I'd love to kind of tell you, the thinking behind it, but we haven't had a chance. Kevin Cheveldayoff hasn't spoken here in Banff. We did make a request to speak with him, but so I can't tell you what the logic behind that was. But, all things being considered, probably not a huge loss in terms of the roster as they were viewing it for this season, but it's disappointing to lose a guy that you spent years developing.
Well, and listen, I mean, it's just part of the game playing in the Canadian market that, we and fans sit around here obsessing about the 13th forward and the 6th defenseman.
Yes.
But let's face it, if this team is going to be a playoff team, is going to have a big turnaround, it's not going to be because of the 6th defenseman or Saku Menelainen, who's ever playing that 4th line. It's going to be on Mark Scheifele, Pierre-Luc Dubois, the big boys, Connor Hellebuck, and we could go down the list. What do you think about the club? I mean, focusing on the guys, I mean, a pretty nice way to finish it with those 2 wins against the Calgary Flames. How's this team looking and feeling going into a pretty significant test on game number 1 against NYR?
It is, yeah. And I mean, I think you have to take the preseason with a grain of salt for sure. And especially the first 4 games, to me, I don't put a lot of stock in what the result was. The lineups were vastly different, depending on who was the home team. I do, though, put some stock in the last 2 games because the Calgary Flames basically dressed their A lineup both games. They didn't dress Jacob Markstrom on Wednesday. But Jacob Markstrom, unless he was going to go score them some goals, wouldn't have helped them that night. But they did dress basically all their top forwards and their top D, and they did that again on Friday, and Jacob Markstrom was in net. And to me, Huss, the Jets soundly outplayed Calgary in 5 of the 6 periods. The second period in Calgary, I think we saw a push from a Flames team that had been ripped by their coach after Wednesday's performance, then came out on Friday and didn't exactly look much better. And so I think, it was inevitable that the Flames were going to push back in the second, and they did. But then I thought the Jets put together a real nice third period in Calgary. And, Calgary is a team that a lot of people are predicting they're going to be right there with the Edmontons and maybe the Vegases in the Pacific Division. They finished second in the West last year. They had a couple big losses this offseason, but boy, oh boy, did they ever get a couple big additions. So the Jets went out and played 2 really good, 5 out of 6 periods, I would say, outscored them 10-3. I think you can put a little bit of stock into that. And, for good reason, that's got some real positive feelings around this club, in addition to spending 4 days out here in Banff and all the good feelings that come from that. I think there were some signs, and certainly, the systems that Rick Bowness has put in place. We saw, points in the game where you could see the defense getting more aggressive and pinching. I saw Mark Scheifele, Nikolai Ehlers, Kyle Connor doing really good jobs of back checking, of covering. And I see it in practice the last couple of days, the urgency, Rick Bowness and how vocal he is with this group, and the pace and the tempo and the messaging. So, I guess it could all come crashing down, with a bad start here. But I think there's a lot of reasons for optimism about, what this Jets group might be able to accomplish.
Okay, a couple other things. I want to ask you about the power play. The one guy we haven't mentioned is Brad Lambert. And Lambert, of course, been sent to the Moose, but he was out playing, I guess, kind of one-on-one with Mike Keane today. Is this just a matter of the agent getting the Larry Simmons treatment and it's taking a little bit longer to get this deal done, or what?
Yeah, and it's interesting because both Kevin Cheveldayoff and Larry Simmons have been out here in Banff. I mean, they got to get a deal done with this guy if he's going to play, obviously. And, Moose season starts Friday. Like, we're running out of time here. You and I talked, I think, even a week ago about what some of the holdups might be that his agent
just be the bonus structure, right? Just grinding them for a higher slot, if you will.
Yeah, that maybe his agent wants some bonus slots that are more befitting of a guy that goes kind of in the top half of the first round as opposed to the third last pick in the first round. I think if the plan is for him to play in the A to start, they'll get a deal done. The agent doesn't have a lot of leverage here. They really don't. And we're talking about, in the grand scheme of it, this isn't going to get held up over the kind of money that we're talking about. What I'll say this though, Haas, looking at now with Jansen Harkins going to the Moose, Kevin Stenlund, Christian Reichel, the Moose, they are loaded and almost too loaded. I don't know where all these forwards necessarily play. I guess Mark Morrison, it's probably a good problem to have, but I just wonder where Brad Lambert, and I'm not saying he doesn't fit in, but I just think it's going to be a challenge to get all these guys, some really high-end forwards at the AHL level, to get them the kind of reps and the opportunities that they need. So I'm not saying that would necessarily change the Lambert plan, but my goodness, looking at the forward depth for the Moose, there's some good players that they're going to be lucky to even be getting in the lineup on any given night.
It's a great point, and we'll be talking lots of Moose going into their home opener on Saturday, the night after the Jets drop the puck against the New York Rangers at Canada Life Center. Mike, I know you got to run just in the last couple minutes. We've got you here. Fill us in on the power play today. How did things look in practice, and in particular that second group?
Yeah, so I think we haven't seen a whole lot of the second group in the preseason because the first unit has been so effective, Haas. Me, the power play has been an early success story. And again, I say take it all with a bit of a bit of a word of caution, because you have to look at what the other teams were often trotting out when it comes to the penalty kill, and sometimes it was a significant mismatch on the ice and on paper. But I think with the Jets, they're still figuring out exactly what they have in the second unit. The first unit's pretty set, right? And it was interesting to see Sam Gagner get a look out there on the second unit along with Wheeler and Perfetti. And I think there's reason for that. Sam Gagner, he played that one game with the top unit when Pierre-Luc Dubois wasn't playing, and he made a couple of just terrific passes. Absolute beauties. Everyone
was talking about those after the game.
For sure. So I go back to what you and I kind of touched on a little bit last week. That second unit, if you've got Gagner out there and Blake Wheeler, and then Cole Perfetti's got to be the shooter there, Huss, because we know Wheeler likes to be the setup guy, although he did shoot the puck a little more last year on the power play. And you've got Pionk and Schmidt as the two blue line options. Neither has an absolute cannon. They all can shoot the puck, of course. But, I'm curious to see how that looks in a game situation. And I got to imagine the message to Cole Perfetti is, Blake and Sam Gagner, they're going to get you the puck, kid. You get open, they'll get you the puck. You got to rip it. You don't be deferring to the veterans. But, it's got to be an interesting feeling if you're Cole Perfetti. You're just starting out in this league, and you're out there with Blake Wheeler and Sam Gagner, one guy who's just played his 1,000th game last year, another guy who's going to play his 1,000th game this year. So that's a big ask for a young player. But let's go back to Cole Perfetti. He's been a shooter in junior, right? He's always been the go-to guy. So this is giving him a lot of looks for sure, and it'll be interesting to see. Of course, if Ehlers, Connor, Scheifele, Dubois, and Morrissey if they pick up in the regular season where they kind of left off in the preseason, I don't think you have to worry about who's on PP2, because PP1 is going to score a lot of goals before PP2 can even see the ice.